me to Exodus chapter 31. Exodus 31. The YouVersion app is not up this morning as far as live events go, so you have to do all the work yourself. I know, that's a lot of work. Exodus 31. So I'm going to start this morning with an interesting activity for us to watch. And I need 3 teen volunteers to be the Israelites. All right, so I want you to go ahead and stand up, 3 teens. Go ahead and stand up. And find a different section other than the middle to go sit down. There we go. All right, go ahead and find a different section to sit down. All right, stand up. You don't get to stay. Go ahead and find another place. Different row, different row. Go ahead and find a different section. Okay, never mind. Go find a different section. All right, don't sit down there. That's not good. Go find a different section. All right, you can go back to your seats or you can sit. I don't care now. I want us to have that picture in mind as we look at the Israelites' life, because as we get into this, you have to understand that they did not get to stay anywhere very long. Until they enter into the promised land, they would barely get their stuff set down and kind of unpack before they'd have to pack everything back up and leave. They were wanderers, they were people in a foreign land, so they didn't get to stay anywhere. They did this for 40 years. I was going to have you do that 40 times, but I figured that would take too long. And so you look at the different cycle that the Israelites go through. You look at how they didn't have a place and they were always wandering. They were never really able to truly be at rest. I remember in my college career in undergrad that I moved 13 times in a matter of 3 years. I was able to literally pack up everything that I owned, everything that I needed in the back of my Dodge Intrepid and be able to move from place to place to place. My roommate was really sad when I got rid of my car because he thought it was the most comfortable car to sleep in when we'd go somewhere. Instead of sitting next to me in the passenger seat, he would lie down in the back seat and fall asleep for like an hour, hour and a half, depending on where we were going. And so I was able to fit everything into my Dodge Intrepid. 13 times in 3 years, I moved from one location to another. They may not have been great distances, but I had the mentality that wherever I'm going, I need to be able to fit it in my car. It was not a big car, it was a small car, but and I played Tetris well, and so I still had a decent amount of stuff and could finagle it in there. But I never really got to a place where I was able to unpack all of my stuff and accumulate things. I never really had a bed wherever I stayed. I just kind of prayed and hoped that they had an extra bed that I was able to crash in. And it wasn't until Cal and I were married that I was able to get a bed, and actually that was a nightmare. It didn't fit in my Dodge Intrepid, and actually I didn't have my Dodge Intrepid at that point. But imagine being able to move from place to place and living like that. Never being able to truly find rest. You always had to be ready to be able to pick up your stuff and move on to the next location. It isn't a great feeling, it's not this comfortable feeling, but it's what they were dealing with. And so as we go to Exodus 31, I want you to remember that as we begin this journey on rest and running on empty. And it says in 31 verse 12, the Lord said to Moses, "You yourself are to speak to the Israelites. You shall keep my Sabbaths, for this is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, given in order that you may know that I, the Lord, sanctify you. You shall keep the Sabbath because it is holy for you. Everyone who profanes it shall be put to death. Whosoever does any work on it shall be cut off from among the people. 6 days shall work be done, but the 7th day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day shall be put to death. Therefore Israelites shall keep the Sabbath, observing the Sabbath throughout their generations as a perpetual covenant." It is a sign forever between me and my people of the Israelites that in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and the earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. Heavenly Father, we pray that you would speak to us now on this subject of rest, as we understand what it is to have a Sabbath day of rest, as we look at the idea of running ourselves on empty. We pray that you would just refresh our spirits. You would refresh our bodies and our ability to continue to worship you and follow the call that you've placed on our lives. We ask this in your Son's name. Amen. So as we begin this idea, we just moved out of our revival weekend. We had many people come. We had about 40, 50 in attendance at almost every event that we had, and it was a great time hearing what God needed to do and what God was saying to the churches, and how we are to continue to follow him in a way that we find ways to go outside of ourselves. That people no longer see the church as a place that they desire to come to, that we as the church need to go and come alongside of them and help them and find out the places where we can partner with them, where we can live life with them. Pastor Vince and I were able to go to a NMI convention this weekend and hear a man, Stephen Morley, speak about Ireland. He said that in Ireland, the church is something that is hated. That they are proudly atheistic because all they have seen from the church is hatred and destruction. That between the Catholic and the Protestant churches, that they don't see the church being this good thing. And so they come alongside of these people and they don't tell them who they are. That they joined the choirs and they found different ways to interact in their community. And over time, when they ask, well, what is it that you do? They're able to share the gospel in that manner. He said we need to re-envision what it means to be the church, because for the most part, throughout the world, the church does not like, or the people do not like the church. And so we have to figure out what it means to go out. And so as we were sitting there listening and talking and just coming out of that revival mentality, it was this wonderful kind of time to be able to spend with them. As we came out of revival, we had this energy, but as I looked at it, and we got to the end of it, we were tired. On Monday, I knew that I had meetings in Portland that I had to go to, and I knew that I had to take Pastor Brad, who was just an amazing speaker, and if nothing else, was just nice to be able to spend with him and reconnect with him and our family. But he gave us some things as a church that we can look at as we revive our spirits, as we refresh ourselves and fall in love with God and what he's done for us. But as we were taking it back, I was dreading that journey. Sunday night, when everything was said and done, we went home and literally kind of crashed where we were. We dropped our stuff. I have this wonderful blue recliner. Well, it's actually Callie's recliner, but if you sit in it, you do not move. It's one of these chairs where the moment you end up in that position, you're just like, I'm out. And Monday, I knew I had to go do this, and so my normal day of rest was not going to happen. And so Tuesday, tired, completely wore out, I got my cup of coffee. I set it beside the chair, and I sat down in the chair with James. And Callie, I'm sure, has a few photos of me sleeping in the chair for pretty much the entire day. I was just tired. I think my coffee got cold, which is very unusual for me. If my coffee is still there, something's wrong. But I was resting and realizing the lack of rest that I had been taking. And as we look at this idea of Sabbath, I think it's one of the things that we as the church most often break if we were to look at the commandments. We may do a pretty good job at loving others and honoring our father and our mother, but when it comes to actually finding rest and honoring a day committed to God, I think we fall far short. And we're going to unpack this a little bit and go a little bit deeper, because over the next 6 weeks, we're going to talk about this idea of what it means to truly rest. As an Americanized culture, I don't think we understand what it means to truly rest, that we have our normal weekday work, and then we have our weekends where we try to get all of our home chores done, and so we always have something going on. And we literally run ourselves on empty when we should be resting and recharging our battery or filling our tank up again on the weekends. We spend it and run on fumes trying to get everything done, and we enter the next week empty. As we prepared for the revival and Easter, and we're going to share a few events that are coming up in May, there are so many things going on that it's going to be important to find rest. And so with the Sabbath, it's interesting if you try to go back and look, and the reason why we're going to talk about this, we're going to jump to Hebrews 4 in a second, so I'm going to give you time to turn to Hebrews 4. But as you look at it, God, and when Jesus came to earth, he said, I didn't come to abolish the law, I came to fulfill the law. That if you were to follow my commands of loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself, you would fulfill all of the laws of what the prophets spoke. And so he didn't come to abolish them, he came to help us fulfill them in a way that we don't have to try to keep all 500, 600 of the laws that are written in the Old Testament. What I find that's interesting, that in order for us to understand this idea of rest, that the religious ruler said, okay, to define what it means to rest, we're going to add another 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 laws. Basically, if we were to translate what they would have had to have done back then to now, they would have had to have memorized a ton of laws and different things and had them at the very front of their mind, or they're going to have one of the best apps ever. So they'd be like, can I do this today? Can I do this today? Can I do this today? And be able to ask it questions. And in doing so, that's going to be even more of a challenge. Like, man, I have to worry about if I can even do this. Like, in my mind, spitting in the ground to make mud with your foot is not work, but to them it was. For them, if they were to spit something out of their mouth, they would have to make an intentional, like, this is not resting to me. They'd have to intentionally think, I cannot have anything touch that, because if I happen to drag anything across it and it makes mud, I'll be working and breaking the Sabbath, which, according to their law, could end up in death. And so they had this almost anxiety attack in my mind of what I would understand, that they had to fear for rest. If you go back and look at the Ten Commandments and where this was first talked about, it talks about not only can you not do rest, but if you have visitors coming into your house that do not know the law, you have to make sure that they don't rest, or that they don't work either. They have to make sure that if you have oxen or cattle or any kind of servant or slave, which I think slavery for them is interesting in Exodus, seeing how they just came out of slavery themselves. But if they had anybody under their house, animal, person, anything, no one could work. We just got done with Easter, and we talked about Passover and how Jesus sent the disciples ahead of him so that they could go prepare the Passover feast, because they were not able to work and prepare meals on the Sabbath. Because to cook or be in the kitchen and making something was work, was laborious activity. So they had to go ahead and prepare everything. So you think about the amount of work that they're trying to do in 6 days and trying to refrain from everything on the seventh day. And I look at my own life and what I do, and I'm trying to understand and reimagine what that looks for me, because I do take a day off. And the way I defined my day off was I'm not going to do any church work. I'm not going to work on my sermons. I'm not going to do any prep. I'm going to try to take Mondays off and do nothing related to church work. And in doing that, and it's something that we're going to have to reimagine as our family, because we'd save laundry, which Callie would normally end up doing, and I'd do like a few things and consider that being working. We do either yard work and trim and mow, and I say we ended up running ourselves even more tired on our day of rest because we're trying to catch up on 6 days worth of work that we put off. 6 days of work that I figured, if I save it for my day off, I don't have to worry about it till then. And the day that is supposed to be holy for us to refill our tanks spiritually and physically ends up disappearing. And so if you actually go through and define what it means for you to rest, I think it's interesting that we don't do it. Hardly ever. I mean, if you were to go through, and we'll do two analogies. If you were to go through your mind, and to the best of your knowledge with what you understand the Israelite law to be, that may be really great for some, and maybe, I really don't know who they are, but I know they're not supposed to work from what you said so far. How many of you have taken a day of rest, true rest, in the last week? All right, so I need to put my hand down. So we have like 2, maybe 3 people. All right, let's go in the last month. How many have actually taken a complete day of rest from work? We're getting closer and better. So we have maybe 7 or 8 there. Let's go since January 1st. How many have taken a complete day of rest but didn't do? Oh, we're getting closer. How about let's go just a year? Has anybody been able to take a complete day? So do you see kind of our issue here? Like for us, rest in especially the Americanized culture and idea doesn't exist. For us to not do anything and just rest is extremely hard. For me not to do anything, Deb bought a few of these little fidget spinner cube things that are absolutely amazing, and mine has disappeared multiple times. She gave me one, and the girls and Callie, I think, use it more than I do. But for me to sit still is hard. When I went to college, I had to play with Silly Putty to help keep my attention. I would play with it underneath the table so that my hands had something to do until I was able to start taking notes on a computer and I could type and be multitasking that way. But we have these amazing little spinner things, and for me to just do nothing, I actually have to be doing something. Sitting still is hard. We don't understand this idea of rest. But we're told that we need to be taking it. Go ahead and go with me to Hebrews 4 if you're not there yet. And I want to jump down to verse 9. Because it's talking about the Sabbath remaining. It talks about Joshua and David before this, and we'll cover them as well. But in verse 9 it says, there remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works, just as God did from his. Let us therefore make every effort to enter that rest, so that no one will perish by following their example of disobedience. If we go back and we remember our teens running around the room trying to find different places of rest, you understand that for the Israelites, they understood what it meant not to have rest. When they were with Joshua and right before they entered into the promised land where they could find rest. They entered out of this area of wandering into this promised land that God said you'll be able to rest here, you'll be able to make your nation, and it will become great. They're able to enter into a period of rest. But it didn't last long. You can see how the Israelites' disobedience led to them being taken captive and having to follow different rules, and so it doesn't rest long. For them, it was this very physical rest where we're like, we can follow the law and rest, but they didn't understand the spiritual side of resting. They may have done all of the work that they needed to, but they forgot that last part of keeping the Sabbath holy. They missed the part where the Sabbath was meant to sanctify them, to refresh them, to breathe new life into them. We miss the part where we're supposed to rest not in just our own selves, but in God's presence. I had a class, and it dealt for many weeks on this idea of burnout. For most pastors, if they don't create seasons of rest and make specific and intentional plans, most pastors burn out within 2 years, never to return to ministry. They run themselves so tired because they do not allow for rest or time off that they end up not being able to handle it. So there's been this push to make sure that they're teaching pastors how to rest. And one of the people that was speaking there says, not only do you have to take days off of rest, but you need to find how to rest throughout your day. He said, because most of us go from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting to planning to planning to planning. He says, and you go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, never slowing down. And if you continue on that path, you end up wearing yourself out to the point of complete exhaustion. You're sick more often, you don't have the same health, And I mean, you just look at your life and you can tell the quality goes down. So you have to find these moments. And so you need to find moments where you're able to spend like a minute or two between your meetings. Where you clear your schedule, you clear your desk, and you rest. You maybe say a silent prayer and you just rest for a few minutes between meetings. That you don't worry about how the last meeting went, you don't worry how the next meeting is going to go, but you rest. You say then after a few hours or whatever, maybe take a little bit longer rest. At lunchtime, take an extra 15 minutes of just rest for yourself. He said maybe you have to have an extended rest because you know a meeting you have coming up is going to be really dreadful or something that you are not looking forward to, and you just take an hour of sitting in God's presence and resting. So you have to be able to create these times of resting and being in God's presence so that He can lead you to do what He's calling you to. You have to have these seasons of rest. God took 6 days to create everything, and I really have a hard time believing that He needed rest. The God who created all things, breathed life into everything, I doubt would get tired. But He gives us this example that for 6 days He made everything. For 6 days we are to work, and on the seventh day we are to rest in His presence. He made a day holy for us. He gave us the example saying, if I, the God who created all things, took a day of rest, what does that say for you? How can you avoid this concept? But that's what we do. We go from one thing to the next, and I looked back. And I looked at our Easter preparation. And we had so many things going on and so many plans, and it went amazingly. We had an Easter egg hunt, we had a breakfast, and everything went so well. We were able to fellowship and just come together and worship, and it was great. And then we followed that up with our revival weekend. We had 5 messages in total about looking at what God's calling us to do and how He's trying to refresh us and how we can come alongside. And it was great. We had 40 people, and we're going to wait for the stories to come out of what that has done for people. Went great. And as Sunday night was done and we were preparing to leave and we were preparing to eat and everything else, Pastor Vince said, so what are we doing for our next sermon series? We don't have anything in planning set. And I looked at it and I said, I don't know. I've been thinking about that from Saturday on, and I said, I don't have a clue where we're going. I came to Monday and we were traveling to Portland. He said, do you have any ideas of where we're going yet? I said, no. I really don't. And it was on Tuesday when I was able to actually sit down myself and rest. And in one of those hour-long windows where I actually stayed awake, that it was God's voice saying, if you're this tired, what do you think everybody else feels? If you, the person who's supposed to be leading them into my ways, is not taking rest and is going from one thing to the next, and are running on empty, what do you think they are doing? And so we're spending 6 weeks in this because I think to fully understand the idea of rest, it's going to take a complete mind shift. Our mindset has been so ingrained into this idea that we have to go from one thing to the next, that nowhere are we really told to rest. Nowhere are we told, yeah, it's okay to sit down and do nothing. You always have to be going and going and going. Next week we're going to look at Jesus' model of Sabbath and rest, because it's not always going and going and going. We do need to have those moments of rest before we do what God's called us to do. It doesn't mean that we don't do anything and we stop living altogether, but we do need to make sure we're taking those moments of rest. we're going to be closing with something a little bit different, something that may be unusual. But as my mentor, as one of my pastors, had us do, just being able to sit in those moments of rest. As we went through and we looked at us raising our hands and the teens running around, I think a lot of us continue to do that, and we don't take that time to rest. I remember looking out over the last few weekends and people either closing their eyes when we were doing the revival service or yawning, or, I mean, we get tired. As a people and as our church, we require a lot of ourselves. We require ourselves to submit to what God is having us to do and put off some of our own ambitions and sometimes our own rest because we feel God's calling us to do so much. And there are many things He's calling us to do. But we don't rest. And so we're going to do something that's a little bit different and a little bit unusual. And we're going to have one of those moments for us to just rest. I don't know how everyone came in this morning, if there are things that were weighing on your mind or things that you just got done dealing with and are just going to church to go on to the next thing and are already thinking that way. But I want us to be able to rest in God's presence. I want us to try to remove the distractions of the things that we just got done doing. I want us to try to remove the ideas of what we have to do the rest of the day. And for just a couple moments, rest. It's not a full day. It will be a far cry from what I'm sure you need. But we need to just slow down and take a few moments to rest. So Vince is going to be, Pastor Vince is going to be playing, and I want you to, whether it is closing your eyes, putting your head down, whatever it is for you to be able to rest. Find a posture that's comfortable to you. If you're Miguel and making sure there's nobody in front of you, you can put your foot on the chair, I suppose, if that's resting. But figure out what it is to just rest. And take a few moments to spend in God's presence before we continue to close in worship this morning. So go ahead and pray with me as we begin. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day that you have given us. We thank you for the Easter season and remembering everything that you have done for us. The life that you lived, the perfect and faultless life, so you can be our perfect sacrifice and give us life. That you can show us what it means to love everyone. And God, we're so thankful that, and as the busyness of that season was, we entered into another one of reviving our spirits and drawing closer to you and understanding that sometimes we forgo rest for wrong reasons. We think that there's always something that needs to be done, and we forget to rest ourselves. So Father, in this time that we set aside, in these few moments that we are declaring to be our mini Sabbath times, remove any distractions from us, anything that has happened or anything that we have to do, and allow us to just sit in your presence, listening for your voice to speak love and comfort over us, offering us your rest that sanctifies not only our physical tiredness, but our spiritual tiredness as well. So Father, we give you this time. Let your Holy Spirit dwell richly on